distance learning again, and that's okay. We will cope, all right? But please do remember that you're always able to send an email asking questions, but it is going to mean, because it's obviously the distance of it, that it's going to be a bit more tricky, perhaps, trying to keep up sometimes, right? And with all of your different subjects. So, you know, do bear that in mind, all right? Now, we're going to carry on, because that would be a good thing to do, and we're carrying on with our HL material, because we need to. So what I'm waiting on is, as I see the numbers ticking up, I'm going to have a look at the register, check that everybody's here who's supposed to be here, and then it will be just HL only for the lesson. And that's going to continue on when we do the more distance learning, obviously, from tomorrow. I'll be at home tomorrow. Yeah. Right, so now, yes, there will be issues with Wi-Fi. There will be all of those other sorts of issues. I understand that. I'm going to be recording the lessons. All right, I'm going to do my best to record all of the lessons so that we can upload them and you can then review them as well. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but it's something that we need to do. And you guys being safe is really important. All right, so we'll keep that in mind. Now, you should all be arriving in the next little bit. I'm going to have a jump into the register. Now, I've got, yes, that would be good. If I push this button, I think it will do a register for me. Maybe. It's thinking. There it is. Meet attendance. Yes, it has registered the 12 of you so far. So there should be a couple others still to arrive. Yes, I see you, Wenhao. Good man. Right, okay. Now, so we're going to press on, and as said, so if you are SL learner and you have registered with me, so I have seen, I've got now 13 of you, then you can depart these shores, and you need to do work on reviewing economics, perhaps, work on your HL subjects, work on your IAs, your TOKs, your EEs, those sorts of things. For those of you who are looking at economics as an EE, I've updated the EE site that I posted, so there's even more stuff on there. Feel free to go through that as well. And if you are thinking, yeah, I was going to do English, but now I want to do economics as an EE, then have a look and see. It is a bit of a shame in a way, because Sion, you've just gotten out of quarantine, ready to come to school, and now we're doing the virtualness of this all. So you're kind of back where you started, but that's okay. That's okay. We will cope. Right. So, ladies and gentlebeans, if you are an SL learner, you can remove yourself from the meet and go and do some work. Thank you. Bye-bye. If you are an HL learner, I would appreciate it if you would stay in the meet, and we will go through the session. In particular, here's our Nearpod code. Right, so HL learners, Nearpod code, jump in as best you can. They should have the, I have a memory of posting it to them. I didn't post. Apparently I didn't post it. There it is. I have posted it now. So maybe there will be a couple more to arrive and just say hello. See. All right. So HL learners, if you can join the meet, the Nearpod 47 GIB, and we will press on from there. All right. SL learners, if you, good, excellent, good to see you, Youngson. Now, as said, thank you, I've registered you now, so you can now depart and go and do some work. All right, sorry about the in and out, but that's kind of how we need to do it. All right, and Kendrick, thank you as well. Thank you for coming, but you can now depart. and this is how we're going to need to do this from now, so that I know that you're there. Obviously, there's going to be technological issues with some of you and possibly with me when we're back home, and we'll just take that into account. As said, I'm going to attempt to record the lessons each time and upload them, so you should be able to, keep up with that. Right, so 47 GIB should be where we're going. And what we had a look at, I know it was a couple of days ago, it was a Friday. Whew, feels like a lifetime ago. One of the things that we were looking at was this idea of monopolistic competition. And we were comparing it to a perfectly competitive firm. We were looking at things like the idea that the products were differentiated. That's quite a big featural difference between a monopolistically competitive firm and a perfectly competitive firm. And that's going to have a big influence, all right? That idea of a differentiated product means they're able to vary the product quite clearly. Here we're talking about that they're going to be based on non-price competition, right? Quite often. So there will be a heavy expenditure on adverts, right? Promotions, marketing. So again, if you are business as well as economics, there's quite a big link here between the business side and the economics side. And the fact that they have some control over price, that shouldn't be forgotten either. So if we were to put them into a table and compare the two, then we'd come out with something like this. And this is something that you can do. You can either screenshot, copy that from the slides, put that into your notes, but that's quite a good summary. See, it's got the different features down here, and then it compares the two. One of the bullet points that you need to be able to do, one of the specific learning objectives, is that idea of comparing and contrasting the different market structures. So here we've got perfectly competitive firm versus monopolistically competitive firm. What are the similarities and what are the differences? And by doing that, you're able then to meet that specific learning objective. Right, so that's my suggestion, that you either screenshot that or copy it from the slides, because you've got those. The other thing, you can actually create your own table, and in your table you could be having the other structures as well, and so you can actually compare across all of those structures should you wish. Along with potentially some real life examples could also go in there, right? I mean, this can be as big as you want it to be at the end. Now, this is here an actual old exam question about pricing and comparing the two market structures. So again, I'm expecting that to come around, right? It is a specific learning objective, and quite often it will be asked. Now it's your chance. Two features of a monopolistically competitive firm. Have a go. Remember, the command term here is explain, not state. Explain. What does it mean? And I shall rest while you do that, whilst consuming my Coca-Cola. Today's lesson, proudly sponsored by Coca-Cola. Wondering if the light is okay. Yeah, I think it is. Is that easier to see, or does that just make it all darker and spooky? I think it just makes me look dark and spooky. All right, here we go. Two features of a monopolistically competitive firm. Well done, Fadiman. Excellent. Joel? Thanks. Well done. About another minute. Okay, good work, Darwin. Remember the idea of explaining. To explain, wanting to say what it means. Work done, eh? Very well written. Is Joel number 2 there? Go. Yeah, we got Joel. You there, Joel? No, other Joel. No. Okay. Right. Good work. Now, we've mentioned this before, okay? So again, it's a little bit terminology-wise, but it's also a theoretical exercise where you're going to need to have real-life examples. So price competition involves any form of competition that involves price, all right? So again, the business learners are going to have a quick uptake with this because this is the sort of stuff that they dig into quite a lot. So it'll be things like, you know, your discounts, okay? Even your buy one, get one free or bog off, right? That is a price competition, right? Because you're effectively halving the price. So any time where there's any discount, 10% off, 20% off, whatever, that's a price competition. So strategies that these types of competition, these types of market structures are going to use, price competition, involving price, and then non-price competition. So any type of competition that doesn't involve price. Now that's going to be quite hard to separate because if you're looking at just a marketing campaign, quite often what they are marketing is their discounts. So the advert that says 10% off is non-price competition, but the 10% off is price competition. So it can get a bit varied, right? But you're thinking here, and someone mentioned it already about, you know, product quality, for example, is a form of non-price competition. So it's those sorts of ideas, you know? And there's quite a lot in that could be possible. Now here's where we take a little bit of a shortcut to discussing the idea of production. Now, again, when we did this in class, or when we would do this in class, it would be a physical activity. You would be running around with Legos building, right? We would be talking about productivity. We would be we're talking about input, process, and output. We're not able to do that, right? So we're going to do this, construct it in our head, right, as we see. Right? Now we're going to talk about also different time periods, right? And the way the new syllabus is organised, this is the order that we do it. So specifically, we're thinking production in the short run. So we need to know when the short run occurs, or when does the short run happen. And you're probably thinking about your athletics, and a 100-metre sprint is a short run, but a marathon might be considered to be a long run. Yeah. Well, in economics, when we consider the difference between a short run and a long run, we're talking about the factors of production and whether they are fixed or not. So in the short run, we are producing, okay, at a point where there is at least one factor of production fixed, can't be changed, right? Okay, so at least one. And quite often the one that we use as an example is things like the factory size, the size of the factory. At this point in time, you can't change the size of the factory. In the future, you might be able to, but right now, in the short run, you can't change that. So that then is going to put a limiting factor on your production process. It's going to impact on how much, what quantities you're able to produce. It's also going to cause an effect with regards to your possible economies of scale, which we will look at. Right? So therefore, and this is an important point, any increase in total capacity is only possible in the long run. That's when we can have that additional factory. And that's only possible in the long run as opposed to the short run. Right? Because in the long run, there are no fixed factors. All bets are off. Everything is potentially possible. So when we talked about the short run and long run, we can say, when does it occur? Fixed, not fixed, but it's a little bit vaguer than an actual specific time period. So we're not saying this week, this month, or even this year, right? So you've got to think away from, even though we're saying short run as a time period, it's a time period connected to whether you've got a fixed factor of production. So here's a complete the box exercise or complete sentence exercise. Fill in the blanks. There you go. I've got about 30 more seconds. Okay, so let's have a look and see what the sentences were. That was them. In the short run, at least one factor of production is fixed and supply unable to change, but all other factors are capable of being changed. You can increase or decrease output using more or less of some factors, but some are likely to be easier to change than others. The increase in your total capacity is only possible in the long run. So this idea of a short versus long run asset is one of those big constraints, restrictions on business. It is a capacity constraint where you are wanting to do more, you are wanting to increase your output, you are wanting to expand your business, but you are limited by those fixed factors. So here we've got rising demand. Okay, so this is our production process here. Right, firms are able to increase labour and capital, right, but only up to a certain level. Then it gets stuck. Right? You can't increase it anymore. You've employed all of the labour and all of the capital that you can, and even that is a bit of a stretch because they're starting to fall all over each other. There's going to be there is a limited amount of space. So therefore, land or the factory size is the fixed factor. So you can produce more, it's possible, but the extra output might actually be less than what you think it is, right? Than what you want it to be. I think it's what you want it to be, because you're constrained by that factory size. We used to do this where you'd be building things out of Lego, you'd have a time limit, and then I'd add more people. And then I'd add more people, and more people, and more people. And you'd start to see that the only way for you to increase the level of output efficiently would be to have more than one factory, right? Having dual production lines and more than one factory. It might be that you then need to have another factory. It might mean that you need to change the logistics of where the actual production process occurs. All of those sorts of ideas can see improvements in productivity, production, and output. So the point being is that that limiting factor is going to cause your output to be less than what you would like it to be in the short run, potentially. And it's the same in reverse. So if demand was to slow down, right, we can reduce the amount of labour we employ, we can reduce the amount of capital that we are using, but the actual physical structure of the plant size, well, we can't shrink it. Yeah? So it can work in our disfavour that way around as well. A classic example of this, just as a New Zealand example, again, apologies, there was a business that was manufacturing meat pies. Okay, you might be familiar with big pies, know what a pie is. And New Zealanders, yeah, I know, look at us, right? We used to eat a lot of pies. It was not quite a staple food, but yeah, a lot of pies. And this particular brand of pie, for some reason, it really latched onto the New Zealand psyche. And we desperately wanted to eat this particular pie. The company just went ballistic. It just went right through the roof. Everybody was wanting the pies, to such an extent that it came to a point they couldn't produce enough pies. So in the longer run, in the planning, they built an enormous factory in order to cope with the demand. Okay. What ended up happening was they were competing with another company, you might have heard of it, just a little one, McDonald's. And McDonald's worked out a quick way to be very competitive with the pie company. And the pie company had built this huge factory, massive levels of capacity, able to produce hundreds and hundreds of these pies. But when they were competing against McDonald's, McDonald's undercut their demand considerably, such that all of a sudden the demand for these pies from the company just fell through the floor. And this company was left with this huge factory, drop in demand, and very little they could do about it. They would, lose labour here and there, they could lose some of the capital, but they were only producing, I think at the end, they were only using about 20% of the capacity of this entire factory. And that was ridiculously expensive. So it cost them a huge amount of money to build the thing, and they were hoping to recover the costs and obviously generate more revenues, and that never occurred. And it was because they were being undercut by McDonald's. Now, in the end, the short version of the story is that this company ended up going bankrupt. And McDonald's ended up buying the factory and all of the successful chains that were selling this particular pie and converting them all into McDonald's. So, right, even in New Zealand to this day, if you go into McDonald's, you are still able to buy a meat pie. You used to be able to, say, still can. And those pies are the same base pie as what was very popular all the way back then. But the point being is that level of capacity, right, is fixed. Even if demand falls, you are still hampered by that level of fixed capacity. You still have to pay for the factory size, even if you're not using it all. Right. So hopefully that's okay. Right, so what is the impact of having one fixed factor, do you think, on a business in the short run? What do you think is going to happen? Here we go, about 30 seconds or so. Add some thoughts down and application of the idea. What is the impact of having one fixed factor in the short run? Good work, Joel. Yes? It does, certainly does. Work done, eh? Yeah. Okay. All right, add another 30 seconds. We'll see if some of the others can have an idea. There we go. Good. Now, for those of you who are, and this is really just me, okay, but for those of you who are comparing the old syllabus to the new, right, always interesting, this is quite different, and the way we are structuring this quite different. So I'm obviously getting my head around this as well, because it's quite different to the way we would normally teach you this. It is good in the sense that it is a comparison here, an application, sorry, of this concept, right? So you've understood now what the fixed factors of production are. You've understood also what this idea of a short run and a long run are, and that will then have an impact on output, because that's then going to become quite important in the next step when we apply this into a business setting. Because this will have an effect on your structures, okay? Right, the different structures that we see, this is going to have an effect on them. Right. Now, here's a little bit of a TOK moment for you. I think was it Joel who did John Maynard Keynes? Someone did John Maynard Keynes. One of his famous quotes, and it gets used quite often, is this idea of, in the long run, we're all dead. Right? Apologies for the rather negative impact of that particular quote. But what does it mean? What is he actually meaning in the context of economics? What is the overall flavour of what it is he's suggesting? Now that you know there's a short run, there's a long run, what is it that he's suggesting by saying in the long run we're all dead? There we go. What do you think he means? Okay, that's interesting. Good thinking. Okay, Joel, that's an interesting thought. One of the problems with you all being absolute rock stars that you are is that you might overthink it just a little bit. I guess that's the TOK curse, the curse of overthinking.
Mr. David. Mr. David.
Oh, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Okay, Nisa. All right. Mind swaying. There's a couple more. I haven't had a thought yet. What do we think it means? It could mean that. Yeah. Any ideas, Winhow? So here's a quick question for you, I guess TOK based along this line. What do people tend to care about when they're dead? Anybody? What do you care about when you're dead?
Worms.
Worms. Yeah, that's the point. All right, that's kind of the point. The suggestion being is that in the long run we're all dead. So why are we building this economic theory about the long run and thinking about and planning and making adjustments to our market structures and having government policies about the long run? So what he's saying is that all businesses and consumers don't operate in the long run because they're dead. So instead, they operate in the short run. So what economists, according to him, should be now thinking about isn't the long run, but it is the short run. We should be considering all of the effects on businesses, consumers, governments, etc., within the short run framework, because that's where we live, right? You consider where you live, short run. So what's immediately in front of your face, that's what you deal with. All sorts of things could be happening, but we're not going to worry about that because that's in the long run. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have done an actual long run. Some of you may have. I know that there was like a charity run thing that they used to do. I don't know if they still do it. And they have to run around a track a lot. Yeah, I don't know how long that specifically is, but I do know some Nexus learners used to do that particular run, round the track. And the point, from my understanding, because I'm not a runner in any shape or form, but from my understanding, long distance running is basically a series of short runs. Yeah, you don't think to yourself, I've got to run 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers, whatever it is. You think to yourself, I'm just going to run from here to the lamppost. And then once you've got to there, I'm now going to run to the next lamppost, and then the next one, and the next one. Right? The point being is that you are concentrating on the short run, and the long run kind of will take care of itself as you move into it. So you worry about the present, all of the things that are occurring there. The future kind of takes care of itself because of the decisions that you're making in the present. That's what he's suggesting. That's the longish way around of explaining what it is that he's on about. Quite a good TOK moment, I thought. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Revenue. Do we know what revenue means? Quick as a flash, who can tell me what revenue is? Go.
Can you hear me?
Not really.
Can you hear me now?
I can see your text, your messaging.
No, I'm like speaking as well. Can you hear me? No, right?
No. Okay. Now you've left the meeting. You're back again. What do we think revenue means? Kind of sounds French in a way. Revenue.
It's what the firm receives, like from the selling of their goods. It's what they receive. Is the amount of money they receive from selling their goods and services.
Yes, well done. Very precisely put. The revenue a business earns, the revenue is what the business earns from the sale of their goods or services. And so that's another terminology that we need to understand. Revenue, return from the sale of a good or service. Got to try and avoid using the word money. Okay. We've also got to try and avoid using the word income, because those aren't strictly speaking what revenue is. Okay. So revenue is the return that a business receives from the sale of the goods and services. And the more goods and services it sells, the bigger its revenue is. And again, those of you who are doing business as well, this is going to be quite familiar to you. In fact, you probably will be very familiar with one of the next things that we're going to do. But if you go online, which I guess you are already, you can actually look up how much revenue some of these businesses actually make. And if you're looking at companies like the Apples of the world and the Amazons and the Tesla Motors, right, you can see some of these businesses, Apple in particular, is earning a lot of revenue, huge amount of revenue, right? And, a lot. So that's something to consider. Now we get to the maths part. Woohoo! Arena says, yay. Unfortunately, in IB Economics, you are not given like a formula sheet. These are equations that you are going to have to learn. Right? There are others, and the standard level learners, they will have to learn those too. These are ones that are specific to the higher level learning topic. So ones you are going to have to learn, you are going to have to know. So, very simply, the total amount of revenue that your firm earns, right? TR, total revenue, equals P times Q. Ah, scary. Total revenue equals P times Q. And you've always got to mind your P's and your Q's. Right? Right, please and thank yous. Okay. Right. TR equals PQ. Now, I know there's maths formula ways of writing things where instead of doing the times, they'll do a dot. So it would be TR equals P dot Q. I don't know if that's how you do maths, but I have had that before with learners, and it confuses me. Okay, it might also confuse an examiner, so do be careful of that. Hopefully it won't, but you never know. So if you're asked to calculate total revenue, you need to do price times quantity. The next bit is the average of the revenues. Now that's going to be quite significant, right? The average revenue. So it is quite literally an average. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your total revenue and you're going to divide it by the quantity. Now, you guys are rock stars and mathematicians and all, so you can quickly work this out, that average revenue equals total revenue divided by quantity, because it's an average. AR equals TR divided by Q. And if you did that exact equation, what would you come out with at the end? What do you think? The average amount of, yes, but what is it?
The amount of money you make per unit you sell.
Yes. That's right. Well, what do we call it? Yes, well done, Max. Fantastic. It's the P. All right. There was a New Zealand joke there, which I have avoided. Okay. Average revenue equals TR divided by Q. So you take TR, you divide it by Q, and what you have left over is the P. The average revenue equals price. And that makes sense because it's the average amount that you earn from selling the unit. So therefore it's the price. Now the next bit, a little bit more language based, marginal revenue. You remember we had marginal utility, right? Where we talked about the extra amount of utility gained from the consumption of one more unit. Well, this is marginal revenue. It's going to be the addition to revenue from the sale of one more, an extra unit of whatever the product is. Now you can work it out because your marginal revenue is going to be effectively the change in your total revenue. Right, so I get a darker color. Marginal revenue equals change in total revenue. Right, that's how I learnt it when I was at school. Okay, so that's the, what is it, the delta symbol in maths, triangle, which means change in. So marginal revenue equals change in total revenue, or TRN minus TRN minus 1, TR2 minus TR1, that idea. So you're working out the change in total revenue. And that is your marginal revenue. Total revenue, average revenue, marginal revenue. Those three equations, again, you're not given them in a list. These are ones you'll just have to know and be able to use to manipulate. All right, so let's see how much you remember. Away you go. Right, see, we've got a couple coming in. Good. Total revenue and average revenue, Joel. Well done. Okay, Nisa. Right. Not sure about your marginal revenue one. That might work. Yes, good. Now, here's another trap for young players is that quite often you will be learning maths in your maths classes, and it will be all sorts of complicated maths that Mr. David Mead doesn't understand, right? You may be able to see different ways to manipulate the equations to end up with the same outcome. Okay, right? Do understand that if you do that, it's going to take me a few seconds if you've got it in an exam to try and figure it out, right, to make sure that you've done it right. And also the examiner may not be aware of that particular strategy, and there's a chance that they might mark you wrong, maybe incorrectly. Okay? So do be aware of that, because I know I've had this in the past. I've had some real rock star mathematicians, and they've said, yes, but you can also do... Oh, okay. Fantastic. Good. Well done. Now, the second half of our equation is going to be about costs. And what we're going to need to do, yeah, I know it's a lot to think about, particularly on a Tuesday afternoon, all right, is what costs there are in a business. Sounds really obvious. There are costs in a business. The costs of production. But wait, there's more. We're going to split the costs up. We're going to be discussing different parts of the costs and some of the implications that there are with those. Okay? So let's have a think about some of the costs there are in a business. So firstly, we've got these ones. We're going to have what are called fixed costs. Those are costs that essentially by definition, right, they're not going to change. Okay? They can change, but only if the output, but not in relation to the output. Okay? So you use as an example, what's the best one? Rent. Okay? So the rent in the school or the rent for the house that you live in, that doesn't change. Right? It's fixed. However, if they renegotiate the contract with you, the rent could change. All right? But that has got nothing to do with school and the output and the number of students and, yeah, right? The rent of the factory has got nothing to do with the output of the factory, right? So it, in theory, could change. The owner of the land could change the rental cost, but in essence, the output has no effect on rent. So therefore, it is considered fixed. Similarly, we've got these ones. These ones are variable costs. Those are ones that are going to change, and they're going to change in direct relation to the output. So if you are producing more of the good, then it is going to cost you more because of usually the raw materials. The land, well, not the land, the labor perhaps, the computers that you need, the machinery that you need, the actual raw ingredients, the primary raw ingredients that you need to manufacture the hamburgers in the hamburger shop, right? You need to produce more hamburgers, so you need more of those raw materials, so that will increase your variable costs. So you've got two types of costs: fixed costs that are not related to output and variable costs which are related to output. I know the fixed and variable thing is a bit confusing, but that's how you think about it. Not related to output, related to output. We're going for time, right. Okay, so then You need to press on and think about how those costs can be applied. But before we do that, now it's your chance. Closing the gaps, what are those two types of costs? About 30 more seconds to have a go, closing the gaps. Right. Okay, let's see what the answer was. In buying factor inputs, the firm will incur costs. Those costs are classified as fixed. Those were the ones that were not related to production, not related to output. So rent, rates, insurance, etc. And then you had variable costs. Those were the ones that were directly related to output, and in particular, raw materials that you need to use in your production process. Good. Maths. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, that was an exciting piece of maths. Surely there's no more. Well, yes, there is. Let's have a look at the cost version. Here it is. Just as we had with the revenues, we've also got the costs. So again, these equations as well, we are going to need to learn. Thankfully, they're very familiar to us. Right? If we have total costs, those are the total costs, the sum of all of the costs. So we're going to add together all of the fixed costs plus all of the variable costs. Add them all together, total costs. Now, in the past, the examiner used to play around with this and used to give you total costs and variable costs and ask you to work out the fixed costs, or give you total costs and fixed costs and ask you to work out the variable costs. Now, whilst that's still possible for them to do, it's less likely in the new syllabus than it was with the old syllabus. But it's still quite a useful trick to be able to do yourself, to test how well you can manipulate these particular equations. We're also going to be able to work out the average of those costs. So average costs, or if you like, average total costs, either works. It's going to be the cost per unit, which is going to be quite important. So you're going to take the total costs and divide it by the output, just as you did before, right? TC divided by Q. Average cost equals TC divided by Q. Now, when I was learning this, I would have a whole list of formulas, and I would learn the formulas and turn them over and write them and turn them over and write them until it was, in my head. And that's not a bad way to do it if you're a list learner like I am. But you might be a different type of learner. You might prefer the sort of the mind map approach, where you've got the key concept in the middle, and then you branch out and you can have images and pictures and the like that connect to it. However it is that you need to learn it, you're going to need to know. Marginal costs, again, we'll come back to that marginal word. That's that one extra idea. So here we've got the costs from producing one extra unit of production. So there it is. There's the equation. And if you were to do it in short form, MC equals change in TC. Yeah? And that's how I learned it at school. MC equals TC2 minus TC1. Or, if you like, MC equals change in the delta symbol, TC. Right, so again, these are all equations. There's the revenue equations. Now there's cost equations. We're building to a picture now, and you're starting to see where we're heading, I'm hoping, because these are two halves of the equation that you're going to end up building, which is going to end up creating another topic for you, which is profit, which we'll get to in a minute. Right, so those were those. Let's see how much you remembered. What was the equation for total cost, average cost, and marginal cost? Where you go? Work arena. Work max. Fantastic. Right, remember the marginal cost as well. Forget about marginal cost. Right. Now, what we're going to need to be doing is we're going to need to apply these concepts. So now that we know the formulas that create them, we're actually going to start playing with them a bit. We're going to look at them in a model context, and we're going to apply the models also to market structures. And we're also going to link it to that idea that I said before about profit and what that is, how that is calculated, and what that's then going to mean for those different market structures. So firstly, we need to consider, we need to apply the time frame to the costs. Okay, that's going to be quite important because, as we said before, in the short run you are constrained, right? You have at least one fixed factor. In the long run, there is no constraint. So that's therefore going to have an impact on your costs. So if we look here, we will see that in the short run, you end up with what's called diminishing marginal returns, because every time you add extra quantities, right, your returns decrease eventually. Now that's going to sound really familiar to you because we have a law of diminishing marginal utility, which was very much like this, where we were adding more consumption and more consumption. And with each additional consumption, hello Sariha, with each additional consumption, what we saw was that that level of marginal utility decreased. So here, the marginal return that you get is going to decrease, right? In the short run, because you're constrained. So you're trying to increase output, so you're adding more labor in, more labor in, more labor in, but the additional, the gain that you get from adding the extra labor in, that additional output is actually going to decrease the more you put in. Now, again, we would do this, we used to do it in class with the Lego, right? And you used to see this quite visually, okay? Where you add another worker in and another worker in, and because they're all competing with the same resources, right, they're going to get in each other's way. They're going to crash into each other, yeah? Giraffe will have to leapfrog over people to get to the Lego, yeah? All of those sorts of ideas. So therefore, what return you can possibly get is actually going to decrease, even though you're hiring more workers. And eventually, you're going to hire another worker and the actual total output is going to decrease. You're actually going to end up with a negative return by hiring an extra worker. So hopefully you won't hire that extra worker, that particular one. If, however, we are talking about the long run, right, that's the period in time where there are no fixed factors at all. So you are able just to increase your capacity. So in theory then, your returns could be increasing because you're able to increase your capacity. It is still possible, however, to have decreasing returns, right? Even then, because you've still got to increase your capacity, right? Even though you've got the ability to, you've still actually got to do it. And it is also possible to have what's called constant returns. Right? Now, when we're talking about this, the easiest way is a little mathematical, so apologies in advance. But if you're increasing your input by 10%, right, and your output increases by 20%, what type of return have you had? Is it increasing, decreasing, or constant? What do you think? Increase, yes. All right. If you increase our input again by 10%, but your output increases by 10%, what's happened to your returns?
Constant.
Constant. Exactly. That's the easiest way to see it. And then the next way is to have an increase of input by, again, 10%, but you've got output. And output is going to increase, but it's going to increase by 8%. So there you can see that there's an increase in output, but it has diminished. All right? It's decreased. There is decreasing returns. Now, typically, that is in the long run, is the only possible time that you could get increasing returns. You're not really going to be able to get increasing returns in the short run. Right? Well, I'm going a bit far, right? But we will get there. So that is the idea of using the time period, right, and comparing the different times and discussing what impact different time periods are going to have on your costs and also on the return that you're able to get from your production. So what does diminishing marginal returns mean? As is the last thing you're going to do today, is just to consider this. Here we go. I know your brain's getting tired. I know, so's mine. See how we go. Yeah, you're on the right path. Remember that idea there? Oh, that sounds very professional. Well done, Lindsay. Okay, yeah, we're on the right path. Good. So when at least one FOP is fixed, you are unable to increase that particular factor. You're unable to increase your factory size. When at least one factor of production is fixed. Any addition, that's the marginal, increase, and a variable factor, typically labor, though not necessarily given that way. Any increase in a variable factor, typically labor, will lead to an increasing output, but at a decreasing rate. That's what we're going for there, this particular concept. You are increasing the labour again and again and again and again and again, but you've got that fixed unit of land, factory size. And so it doesn't matter how many people you push into the factory, you're going to get an increase in output, potentially, but they're going to get in each other's way. They're going to, they're going to cause diseconomies of scale, which we will cover. They're going to decrease over time the extra amount of output that you're able to get. You still might get increase in output, like the example that we had of increasing returns, where we saw that it was 8%. You'd increased your input by 10%, your output was 8%. So that's an increase, but that's less than the increase that we had. 8%, 10%. And it might go on. You might increase by another 10%.
Mr. David?
Yes?
Could you please read out what you wrote on the board again?
Read out what you wrote on the board again. Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
All right. When at least one factor is fixed, any additional increase in a variable factor, say labour, will lead to an increasing output but at a decreasing rate. Fixed factor of production, add the labour, will increase output, but the increase in output will be at a decreasing rate. It's a law, believe it or not, the law of diminishing marginal returns. Just as we had the law of diminishing marginal utility. They kind of, in a way, parallel each other. Ooh, that'd be a good research to think about in the future. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're actually going to stop there for the day. All right, that's an awful lot for you to absorb all at once. And I apologise, but that's high level. That's the way we roll. All right, please, I know I see you in quite a short succession. I'm going to see you again tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow morning. All right, Superhero Appreciation Day. So please do consider the concepts we've just covered. Maybe between now and then you're able to have a review of the different market structures and the costs and the revenues, etc. That would be a good thing to do before tomorrow. Because as said, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to take all of this and then apply it. And yeah, it's possible that when we're doing the application, you'll be able to link all of this together, and that's that synergy idea, right? But if you are picking it up as we go, that's a lot easier, right? So we're going to be linking this together. We're going to be talking about profit levels. We're going to be talking about the different cost structures again and the different revenue structures and how they apply to the different market structures, the different businesses. And we're going to compare them all, and we're then going to have the government involved and see if the government can solve the market power that exists within them, what policies they're going to put into place, and we're going to then evaluate the effectiveness of what they're going to be doing. Right? But don't panic. We've got the time to do all of that. Okay? No stresses. Right. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, virtually speaking, as we would say in the land of my birth, he kōnera, which means goodbye for now, and we will see you tomorrow, Superhero Appreciation Day.
Bye, sir. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
See
Mr.
you.
David. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. David. Mr. David?